Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bilal, moderator for this conference. Welcome to the conference call of Aptus Value Housing Finance India Limited, arranged by Concept Investor Relations, to discuss its result for the second quarter and half year ended September 30th, 2021. This conference call may contain forward-looking statements about the company, which are based on the beliefs, opinions, and expectation of the company as on the date of this call. These statements are not the guarantee of future performance and involve risks and uncertainties that are difficult to predict. At this moment, all participants are in listen-only mode. Later, we will conduct a question and answer session. At that time, if you have a question, please press star and 1 on your touchtone phone keypad. Please note that this conference is recorded. I would now like to hand the floor to Mr. Anandan, Chairman and Managing Director. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bilal. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. I am Anandan, CMD of the company. I welcome you all to the conference call to discuss the financial performance for Q2 FY22. I have with me Mr. P. Balaji, ED and CFO, and Mr. S. Subramaniam, our ED and Head of Business. The results and the investor presentations are available on the stock exchanges as well as our company website. I hope everyone had a chance to look at it. With the unlocking of the economy and ease of restrictions, I am confident of the fact that the economy will grow faster henceforth. Just prior to that, while business activity was impacted in Q1 due to second wave of corona, things returned back to normalcy towards the end of Q1 and more pronounced manner in Q2. This is reflected in our overall performance, be it in disbursements or collections, which, as you are aware, are very crucial for any HFC. In Q2, we were almost at pre-COVID level, both in terms of collection efficiencies. For Q2, we have disbursed about 421 crores, representing a growth of 70% over Q1, mainly because Q1, the larger impact of COVID was there. Our NIMs for the quarter improved, net interest margin has improved by 6 basis points to 9.09%. Our gross NPA reduced compared with the June first quarter, reduced by 26 basis points to 0.81. Profit after tax for the quarter was about 85 crores, representing an increase of 16% Q on Q. We continue to grow consistently and close September 2021 with an AUM of rupees 4,480 crores, representing a growth rate of 27% year on year. Key highlights of the half year performance being disbursements for the half year is about 668 crores, growth of 37%. Our AUM, as mentioned earlier, growth of 27%. Our PAT for the half year is about 159 crores, growth of about 30%. Our GNP, gross non-performing assets, at 0.81, there's a marginal raise of 14 basis points as on March 21. though it has come down when compared with the June first quarter. Our ROA is at 7.43, which is one of the best in the industry, and our ROE is little over 14%, 14.09%. The sufficient cash or cash equivalent on balance liquidity is maintained at about 736 crores. Net worth is very strong at about 2,700 crores, implying we have a very strong capital adequacy to take care of the future growth. I now hand over the line to Mr. P. Balaji, CFO, to discuss various business parameters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, all. As on 30th September 2021, we had a total live customer base of over 72,000, which represents a growth of 31% on a year-on-year basis. Total number of branches were 198. We had added 8 branches in the first half of FY22. Employee count was at 1,998. Disbursements increased by 37% year-on-year to 668 crores in first half. AUM grew by 27% year-on-year to 4,482 crores. As on 30th September 2021, our average yield on the portfolio was at 16.95% and average cost of funds were at 7.86%, resulting in a NIM of 9.09%. Our OPEX to assets were at 2.74%, resulting in a healthy ROA of 7.43% and ROE of 14.09%. We have well-diversified borrowing profile, and almost 51% of our borrowings were from NHB and DFIs like IFC and large financial institutions. Balance 49% of our borrowings were from banks. We had sufficient on-balance sheet liquidity of 736 crores as on September 2021, and hence we are going slow on additional borrowings, and high-cost loans are either being prepaid or renegotiated. As of now, we enjoy a rating of A+ from both ICRA and CARE, and we are taking up with the rating agencies for a possible rating upgrade. Collection efficiencies has improved to pre-COVID levels and stood at 99.7% in September 2021, vis-a-vis 95% in June 2021. The backlog that has got created due to the COVID-2 impact in Q1 FY22 is being collected in a phased manner. This has actually led to a marginal increase in 30+ DPD. However, we are confident of collecting the backlog in the ensuing quarters. Gross Stage 3 assets declined to 0.81% in September as compared with 1.07% in June 2021. It marginally inched up by 0.14% as compared to September 2020. We have restructured 1.56% of our AUM. More than 85% of our customers who were restructured are paying on time and have cleared all the dues. Further, we have strengthened our provision coverage ratio from 0.41% in March 21 to 0.72% in September 2021. The provision coverage ratio for Stage 3 assets stood at 25.16%, and for Stage 1 and 2 assets stood at 0.51%. Our PAT for the first half stood at 159 crores, representing a growth of 30% year-on-year. Our Q2 PAT was at 85 crores, representing a growth of 16% quarter-on-quarter. As on 30th September, our net worth was over 2,700 crores. Thanks for the hearing. Now, with these remarks, I open the floor for the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question and answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask any question may please press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. To ask a question, you may please press star and 1. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. We have a first question from the line of Ashutosh K. Mishra from Ashika Stock Broking. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity. A very good set of numbers you have come out with. So I want to basically know first on the competitive scenario in the market which you operate. what type of prepayment?
1 second, Ashutosh. We are not able to hear you clearly.
Are you able to hear me now, sir?
Slightly better. Just go ahead with the question.
Just a minute. So, what type of competitive scenario we are seeing in the market which we operate, basically the southern market, and is whether prepayment rate has increased or it has remained at the same level compared to our historical average?
We operate in two segments of the market, namely the home loans and the business loans. The competitive market is fairly good. This part of the country, the southern part of the country where GDP is highest. Most of the financiers are present in this market. The question of second, you asked about the pre-closure, the transfer of loans. That is the question you asked, correct?
Yes. So what is our trend on the pre-closure of the loan?
Yeah. Generally, as we explained in the slides also, the pre-closure ranges between about 7 to 7.5%. But even in that, 83% of the pre-closure comes from the own source of funds of the customers. Our customers are being self-employed customers. They are able to, not like salaried customers, they are able to take money from their business or from the hereditary, or they are able to get money. So they are able to close the loan from 83% from own source. Only 17% of our pre-closures are transferred to other financial companies. So if you convert that, our pre-closure BT out rate will be about 1.2%.
Okay, and do you see the way whole housing finance space is stepping up? Lot of new players are coming, or even existing players are increasing. Competition is increasing. Do you see this changing in future, or you are confident of maintaining this repayment or transfer to the other financier will remain at the same level?
We are seeing this for last about 3-4 years. We are seeing the same kind of percentage and same kind of own source from the customers. So we are not envisaging a big change in the percentage in the near future. Actually, about the competition, basically we are present in we are present in most of the towns, tier 1, tier 2, and most of the places in the market where we operate, namely Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, and Karnataka. So the carpet coverage is very high. The number of branches and the staff is very high, and also we are there in the market for quite long, and being able to satisfy the customer, they are able to refer new customers to us. So the brand name is very high in this market. So for a competitor to replicate all this, it will take slightly a longer time for us.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Second part of my question is basically on the cost of funds. So you just mentioned that you expect some rating upgrade, and you're renegotiating with the existing borrowers out there. So if you can put light, how much decline in the cost of fund, or where you see our cost of fund 6 months down the line, if I
Thanks. Sure. Thanks, Ashutosh. To figure the cost of funds, the cost of funds, which was at 8.4% as of 31st March, has reduced to 7.86% as of now. It is basically because of the incremental cost of funds other than the NHB, which was raised at around 7 to 7.2%, and the NHB funds were raised at an average rate of around 5 to 5.5%. So it is basically this which has brought the cost of funds down as of September. But going forward, as you know, the interest rate differential between a A-rated company or A-plus rated company and a AA-rated company is anywhere between 1.1 to 1.5%. So if you are going to get the upgrade, this cost of funds reduction is likely to happen on the incremental borrowing.
Okay. So any ballpark number, if this 7.86 number, if I ask at the end of this year by March, where you see, or it will remain at the same level?
If you look at our funding profile as of date, I have a cash balance of almost 736 crores, plus the incremental funds that is going to come from the surplus from businesses. I think this is going to be this funding is enough for us to go up to March 2022. If at all, if I'm going to borrow more or additional funds, it will be at obviously less than at least 0.5 to 1%. The additional funds will be borrowed at less than 0.5 to 1%.
And sir, out of our bank borrowings from the banks, how much is linked to the MCLR and how much is to the external benchmark? If you can
look at the total borrowings, the ones which I mentioned as 51% were from both 29% from NHB and 22% from securitization and DFIs and IFC. All these are fixed for the entire tenor. NHB, as you know, gives funding up to 10 to 15 years, and IFC funding or the securitization is the funding for the tenor. IFC funding is for the 7-year tenor. Okay, so all these are fixed rate loans. The 49% which is representing the bank borrowings are linked to the MCLR, and this is most of them are linked to 6 months or a 1-year MCLR basis.
Okay, got it.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Yeah.
Thank you very much. A reminder for the participant to ask a question, you may please press star and 1. The next question is from the line of Alok Shah from MNCL Group. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity and congratulations on great set of numbers, sir. I had 2 questions. One was more on the margin side. Clearly what we've been seeing here is that there is a lot of cost benefit which is pushing the margin higher, sir. Optically, the best ever in last 4 years or so. What according to you is a more sustainable margin for the kind of business model we are into? That is what, sir, I would like to understand from you, one. The second part, if I could I put up my questions to you first?
Yes, please.
Sure, sir. The second one is more on the securitization. That is just a 5% of your borrowing profile or borrowings. Is there something that we look at in terms of taking securitization as a number closer to 10% or higher as a percentage of overall borrowing or so? And the third question here would be, sir, more on OPEX. As to, we currently are, fairly well spread and have a very good expansion plan in our markets of presence, historically where we have been there, the 4 southern states. But you've also talked about pouring into new 3 states. So what, according to you, could be the near-term OPEX to asset ratio? I'm not asking about cost to income ratio, sir, but more on as an OPEX to asset ratio. That's that you would look at.
Sure. If you look at the margins, to explain how sustainable it is, we have 2 companies. First of all, one is the housing finance company. The other one is the NBFC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the housing finance company. And in the HFC, we do all loans relating to housing loans. There are 4 products which gets booked under this. One is the housing finance, which is the direct housing loans given for the purpose of either construction, purchase, repairs, or renovation. The other one is what we call as quasi-home loans. Quasi-home loans are loans we are in the business of funding self-employed customers. These kind of customers, during the course of running the businesses, have their own cash flows, have surplus cash flows, and they use that funds for building their house and also complete the house. But after completing the house, maybe 3 to 6 months down the line, they find themselves cash short for running the business. So what they do is they come to us for a loan, which we give also, but the thing is, like, as per the NHB direction, this cannot be classified as a housing loan. So this gets classified as quasi-home loans. The other product which gets booked under this company is the insurance product, which we give to the customers for covering their lives under the credit shield arrangement with an insurance company. The other one is the top-up loan. If you look at the housing loan, on the total AUM, it constitutes around 54%. And if you look at the quasi-home loans, it constitutes around 16%. The insurance and top-up loans constitute around 4% each. The other loan which we give is the small business loan. This gets booked under the NBFC. These are loans which are given to the customers for enhancing their businesses. We don't give these loans for consumption purpose like marriage, education, etc. So what happens here is, we give this loan for a period of 7 years and we charge interest rate of 21%. And the housing loan, we charge anywhere between 14 to 14.5%, and non-housing market home loans, we charge anywhere between 17 to 17.5%. The blended yield of this, all these products comes to around 17%, and with the lower OPEX and also the reduction in the cost of funds, our ROA is at 7.43%, which is clearly 3 to 4% more than our peers. Now coming to the sustainability, the quasi-home loans and the non-home loan, the small business loans, we are charging what the market is charging. Suppose if you are considering the small business loans, there are players in the southern part of India like 3-star, 5-star, etc., who are charging anywhere between 24 to 25 or 27%. So we are charging slightly lesser than that, so we don't have any intention to reduce the interest rate there. Similarly, the quasi-home loans also, quite a few market players charge in the range of 16 to 17 to 17.5%. So there also the sustainability of charging the interest rate is there. As regards housing loans, we are a tad 0.5 to 0.75% more as compared to the peers, so which we were planning to reduce over the period of time. But without affecting the NIMs, we will be doing this because if we go for an upgrade, there is going to be a cost of funds reduction. Okay. Yeah. So this is the basis in which the sustainability will happen.
Sure. Sir, if I could ask a question here.
OPEX also will continue to be at around 2.74%. So this, yeah.
Securities.
This is on the sustainability. Now coming to the securitization. Securitization, what we do is the 5% of the total borrowings which is represented as securitization is pure securitization through pass-through certificates. It is not a direct assignment first. And we as a tool for borrowing, we are not against securitization, but we will do securitization if the normal opportunity for raising funds is not available. Because we don't have a capital constraint or a capital adequacy constraint. So this is the plan with which we will do securitization. As regards direct assignment, we might not be in favor of doing that due to our internal policy.
Yeah. Sure. So is it safe to say that at least on securitization part, that number is here to stay at probably low teens, unless there is need for liquidity towards lending?
Yes,
sure.
Yes.
On the first part, sir, on the NIM, I really appreciate the effort that you've taken in explaining each of the segments and the ROIs therein. And where you also highlighted that at least on the housing loan, which is 54% of your AUM, there is a need to kind of look at reducing it by 0.5 or 0.75. So clearly, at least on the lending side, there is a reason to believe that yields could kind of may remain here or move gradually lower, but it's more the cost benefit that could come through. Is that the right understanding?
Yes.
Okay, and so putting a number, not really putting a...
Hello, just one second. Just to add a point here, Anandan. See, basically, as Balaji explained, product-wise yield, the sustainability is absolutely clearly there. On the pricing of HL is concerned, we made, actually we did reduce by about 50 basis points, a couple of months back, and we want to stay with that. And this reduction will entirely come from our either, in fact, started coming already through the form of lower borrowing, the cost of funds, or through better productivity at the branch level and the staff level. So in other words, this optimization of lending rate of 50 basis points reduction for the HL will not really have any impact as far as our NIM is concerned or ROA is concerned.
This is very helpful, sir. It gives a better picture on how NIMs could move in a more sustainable manner. Sir, on the OPEX side, I hope I can ask you a question on the OPEX unless there is any queue here. Can I go ahead, sir, on the OPEX front, please?
OPEX?
No, I would request you to, sir, please come back in the queue.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Yeah.
The next question is from the line of Arjun Bagga from Nirmal Bang. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, sir. So I had a question regarding this, our restructuring book. So I could see that we have around 1.56% of restructured assets. So in that, sir, can you please provide a segment-wise breakup, like how much is it for the NBFC and how much of it is for the HFC?
Okay. Just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
On the HFC side, it will be around 50 crores. The balance will be on the 20 crores. Will be
percentage and over this.
Almost 70% will be from the HFC book and 30% is from the NBFC book.
Sure, sir. Thank you. And sir, in terms of the slippages from this book, so what would be our expectation of the slippages from this book over the next 2 years?
We have given this restructuring in the month of June. Out of that, 85% of customers have paid all the 3 months, that is July, August, and September. Only the 15%, even there, hardly 3-4% has gone into all the 3 months, and rest have paid 2 buckets and 3 buckets. So 85% has paid close to about all the 3 months after the restructuring. So we feel that after the restructuring, the performance will be really big, at least going by the recent 3 months of performance.
Sure, sir. Thank you. That answers it. I had another question. And sir, so I could see that in terms of branch expansion, so we are looking at expanding in Maharashtra, Odisha, and Chhattisgarh. Sir, so this question is related to the competitive intensity. So, like, how do we look at the competitive intensity in the south, in the north, and in the west regions?
Our policy is go deeper into the market, in the states where we operate. That is the first policy. So we will be opening more branches in the states like Andhra, Telangana, and Karnataka. But having said that, your questions on the Odisha, Maharashtra, and Chhattisgarh, we will be opening branches there. In fact, just to give you an update, we are starting about 1 or 2 branches in the Odisha. So we will test that, then we will expand more into the Odisha market. Then we will see about the Maharashtra and the Chhattisgarh. So whenever we open a new branches, we see 2-3 things. One is what is the overall market. Second, what is the operational culture of that and the repayment and the delinquencies. And more important, how we fix our product. That is, we are very strong in the self-construction product rather than purchase or other products like other competitors. So if it fits our model of self-construction, then we open in the particular branches. So we will open this Maharashtra, as I told, we are going ahead in Odisha, but Maharashtra and Chhattisgarh, we will go in a phased manner.
Got your point, sir. Got your point. And just on this competitive intensity thing, I'm sorry to harp on this. So, like, can we assume that it is highest in the south and then in the west and then in the north? Would that be an appropriate assumption?
It is not like that. See, every market is competitive, but all that you need to have a clear product, clear process, and clear main important thing is the underwriting process and the reach of the customer marketing. So you can always do that business. So competition, our feeling is most of the market will be almost same.
You know, just to add a point in that, actually at a philosophical level, we would really want to follow a geographical policy of looking for leadership in wherever we operate. So being headquartered in Chennai, we started Tamil Nadu and we have expanded progressively over the last 10 years in southern states, which provides significant economic growth rates, GDP growth rates, and demand for loans, a reasonable credit culture, low delinquency, low OpEx, and things like that. So we would, and as we go along, we will look for expansion geographically on a contiguous basis, and not really in the order of south-west and north business, but in the order of contiguous, states. That's where Odisha, Maharashtra, and Chhattisgarh was chosen. We currently have about 198 branches, and more branches will come in these contiguous adjacent states, really. The philosophy, again, as I mentioned, is that we don't believe that, we should really look at an all India presence of being operating in all four, zones or the directions of the country. And, there are some companies, even with, let's say, 75 branches operating out of 14 states and all. It is their philosophy. But our philosophy is really operate deeper than wider, but then with a clear aim of being a leader and leadership position. And that's all will be the determining factor. And we'll continue to grow in southern states. At the same time, we'll continue to keep expanding on the adjacent states. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, sir. This is quite helpful. I have more questions. I'll come back in the queue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is from the line of Avinash Tanawade from Dalal and Broacha. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I just have a few questions. What is our growth in statewise growth in disbursement?
Okay. Statewise.
See, we have, as told by Mr. Anandan, we have in Tamil Nadu, we have about 50% of our books come from Tamil Nadu, 29% comes from Andhra, 11% comes from Telangana, and 10% comes from in Karnataka. These are the four breakup of our AUM. And in list of branches, 79 branches come from Tamil Nadu, 69 comes from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana is 29, and Karnataka is 21.
Okay. So about NHB borrowing, around 29% of our borrowing comes from NHB. Most of the time when NHB lend the money, they have some yield cap. Do we have any kind of yield cap on NHB borrowing?
In terms of NHB borrowing, there are 3 or 4 schemes where NHB gives finance to the HFCs. One is the regular refinance scheme. There is something called there is a scheme which is being given at 3 to 3.5% with a cap of 3% or 4%. So there are schemes, but we have borrowed only under the regular refinance scheme, and there is no interest rate cap on those kind of schemes.
So what is the average borrowing cost for us from NHB borrowing?
NHB borrowing should be around 5.5 to 6%.
And bank borrowing cost of borrowing?
Bank borrowing cost should be around 7.2%.
Okay. And what is our bounce rate in the month of August and September?
Bounce rate pre-COVID, that is before the COVID, it used to be around 20%. Now it is ranging between 25 to 26%.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I will go into queue for my other questions. Thank you.
Sorry, one more point I missed out in the bounces. Even within the bounces, about 35% we are able to collect digitally. Only the remaining part we are collecting in cash from the customers.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. That's it from me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is from the line of Piran Engineer from CLSA. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon and congrats on the results. Just wanted a few questions. So firstly, what percentage of our customers are new to credit?
New to credit is 40% of customers are new to credit. Typically, these kind of customers normally borrow gold loans and small things like two-wheelers and things like that. And as you are aware, many of these customers in the south part of the country, chit funds are there. But chit funds data doesn't come in your credit bureau report. So just to answer your question, it is about 40% new to credit customers.
Okay. And so secondly, can you just talk a bit more about the collection strategy? Because your 30 DPD is around 10% and 90 DPD at 1% or so. So a lot of, the collections in the 30 to 90 bucket is quite strong. So can you just talk a bit more in detail about that?
Yes. Right from the day when we started the company, we have not outsourced any of the collections operations. Be it a soft collection or be it a bucket collections or be it a legal recovery. Everything is internal. All our collection staffs are internal staffs on the rolls of the company, and all our legal managers are also on the rolls of the company, and it is not outsourced. So what we do is we collect NACH from all the customers. 100% of the customers, NACH is collected. All our operations are centralized. So we deposit everything from head office, and once the bounce details comes, these details are passed on to the field, and they do the field collection. As I told you, they do two things. One is the digital collection and also the cash collections. These people in the field, they have got a mobile device where they can pass on the receipts immediately. It comes to the customer's account online basis. There is no manual intervention, and also that once you do that, these mobiles also will help you to find out who is the nearest customer, and it also gives receipt and SMS to the customer, and a lot of controls, digital controls we have established on the field collection. Because of these operations and also our trained staff, our attrition in this particular segment is also very less. So we are able to do good soft collections, and of course some of the customers, despite our collections, it goes to the recovery. So we include SARFAESI, or we include the arbitration and also the Negotiable Instrument Act check bounce to make the customer come to the table and make the payment. So this is how the whole collection process is set. And more, we have got a very strong daily MAS which tells you about how many customers bounce, how many customers visit has been done, what is the collections done on the daily basis, what is the productivity of each staff in the field, and a lot of other things like that. And also we have got maker and checker, so that the money what is collected in the field directly come to our office. So this is what helping us for quite some time. During the period of Corona, where the restrictions in travel was there, we have used all our staff from all other departments to do the collections on the field. So this is probably one of the factors which is helping us in the soft collections.
And do you have like different teams for soft bucket and hard bucket collection?
No, what we do is that because we have got branch level staff, we have got the persons depending on the bounces and depending on the buckets of the customer. Suppose there is only hardly few accounts, then we'll have one person. Then based on the requirement, we'll have second person, and based on the requirements, we'll have the third person. But we have not separated buckets between our collection staff.
Hard one, maybe legal.
Legal only when it goes to a NPA, then it goes to a different, our legal managers, internal legal managers who follow this on the legal actions.
Understood. And sir, you mentioned you all also invoke SARFAESI and arbitration proceeding. So typically in a year, how many properties would you all be repossessing in a normal year? May not be last COVID year, but in a normal year.
Generally, right from the beginning, our policy is to settle with the customer rather than repossession and selling, because it is not that we are not able to repossess, but then once you repossess, the value falls and things like that. So we always try to settle the properties with the customer right from and all these years we don't have any principal write-off. We are able to, because two things, our credit underwriting is good and also our LTV on the product is close to about 40%. So there is always the intention of the customer to settle the loan with us rather than losing the property. Okay, talking about this as on day we have got about 14 stocks, only about 84 lakhs, which is in our seized asset out of the 4,500 crores loan book. So that repossessed asset. So that explains us that our repossession is very less, but we are able to settle the loans with the customer.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. A reminder for the participant to ask a question. You may please press star and 1. The next question is from the line of Shailesh Kanani, an individual investor. Please go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity. Congratulations on good set of numbers. Sir, I have just one question. Is there any part of business that would worry you, or any change in dynamics which would worry you on business terms, or which investors should be concerned about with respect to our business model?
Basically, if you look at our, we don't do any concentrated business. For example, we don't fund to any builder, corporate, wholesale. It's all zero. Our entire loan book is granular retail, and the maximum loan would have given to any customer should be about 25 lakhs. Even that is not more than 2-3%. So in other words, our average loan size is only about 8-9 lakhs of rupees, and our average EMI is only about 12,500 rupees. And it is, for example, we have currently about 72,000 customers, and multiplied by 8-9, that's what will add up to our loan book of outstanding loan book about 4,460 crores. And these customers come from 80% self-employed, 20% salary. The 80% self-employed, they come in different professions and vocations, something around 55, 60 different types of businesses, largely service businesses. And it is provision stores, pharma, servicing, foods and vegetable selling, small hotels. That way it is really very dispersed across customers, across geography, and small home loans and small business loans. So there is no concentration of any kind, from our loan book point of view to give us any particular sector related, shock or changes.
Sir, okay, got that. That would be from the customer point of view. Anything on the macro front that would kind of worry you? Anything?
Nothing. We are not able to see. Again, if you really go back in the last 10 years, as you know, we came across several headwinds like others. One is, for example, the high LFS or demonetization or GST or COVID-1 or COVID-2. Even COVID-1, we had maintained a good growth rate in our AUM and in our profit. We have been able to maintain over 30% growth rates. Even FY21, which got impacted by the COVID-1. See, the question is that when you start funding small loans to people to construct a house where they live in themselves, where the land is owned by them, we only fund a part of the construction cost. That's why our loan to value is low, and invariably they live in that house. And to the extent they also save on the renter and things like that. And there are other community pressures to really pay for their homes and things like that. So resulting in that, even if we have the, we are not able to really, not only us, we are not able to see anything because we have seen surprises in the past 10 years. But these surprises we are able to really, the impact on us is minimal, and as an organization we are able to handle it well.
Okay, sir. Great. Thanks a lot, sir. That's from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is from the line of Alok Shah from MNCL Group. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, sir, and for taking up a follow-up question. My question was more around trying to understand how do you see the OPEX to asset ratio play out? You talked about moving into Orissa and Maharashtra. So, what's a typical break-even point, or that either in terms of time or AUM, or if you could provide better clarity on such line items.
See, basically, as been mentioned earlier, our Apex is one of the lowest, the best in the industry.
Right.
Basically because our cost structure, we are very frugal in incurring the cost, be it revenue cost or capital cost, and our warehousing expenses and our branch-wise expenses, and our productivity is the best, highest, and our credit cost is the lowest. So in other words, if you look at the total OpEx, that's why it's one of the best at 2.7% of AUM. And so given that, the scope for further reduction may not be much. But having said that, we don't expect it to go up either on account of the new branches. As we mentioned that we already got about 198 branches, and in a year we may add maybe about around 20 branches also in a year. In fact, so far in the current year, we have added 10 branches, which is not without really impacting our OpEx. Basically because while there will be an additional cost coming on account of these new branches, we will also have the productivity of those branches which have started 6 months back, 1 year back, 2 years back, where when you look at our profile of the branch network of the 198, there are some about 100 and odd branches. If you really see, they finished 118 branches. They finished over 3 years, where the average loan book is over 30 crores. Yeah. Whereas there are about 58 branches with 1 to 3 years, where the loan book is around 11 crores or so, and 22 branches where the loan, it's less than 1 year, where the loan book is around 1.5 to 2 crores. So we will start getting the benefit out of these branches, and that will really pay for our new branches. To that extent, we have not see any significant change in our OpEx. One thing. Second thing is, we really have a reasonably low-cost branch operations, until such time we cross certain threshold level. Our break-even will be, normally it will be between 4 to 6 months. That's about it.
Sure. Okay. This is helpful, sir. And just a quick question. When you talk about a client base of 72,000 odd customers, would there be any customer where there is an overlap of the loan product? I mean, you would have given a housing loan and then you give a quasi loan, or maybe a loan from an NBFC.
See, this, as we explained, we have got 3 products. One is the home loan, the Kasi home loan, and the small business loan. Between these customers, there is no crisscrossing. Each loan is an individual customer and an individual property. But some of the customers of home loan or a small business loan, we would have given a top-up after a good seasoning and after seeing the repayment. That is close to about 4.5% of our AUM. So to that extent of 4.5%, there is a crisscrossing. But other than that, every loan is an individual account given to a single customer with a single property. And almost close to about 99%, the customers, we don't have second loan to the same customer other than this 4.5% top-up loan.
Sure. This helps. And sir, final question. Whom do we write to at the MD's or CFO's office for a detailed interaction? I'm sorry to ask you this question.
You can contact me. Yeah. You can contact Concept as well. They will guide you to me, and we can have an interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The next question is from the line of Franklin Morris from Equentis Wealth Advisory. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. So, I've seen that, large part of our growth has come by, funding from via equity sources. So, is this a conscious decision to fund via equity?
No, it is not a conscious decision to fund to do business out of 100% equity. Because then the company and the shareholders will lose the benefit of leverage and consequential, tax-related after-tax returns. And in fact, I'm sure you know pretty well much more than us in the sense that cost of equity is the highest cost. The equity costs you the highest when compared to any other form of debt, given various issues. So in other words, Clearly, our intent is not to fund the business out of equity alone. But then having said that, being a standalone company, not being part of a large industrial house or large NBFC, we wanted to have a strong threshold capital that will enable us to get a good credit rating, good funding, long-term funding which is required for this business from banks and the other financial institutions. And towards that only we've been sort of strengthening, we have strengthened our equity through, to a reasonable threshold level as seen by us. And going forward, given the strong network that we have now and the margins that we are making, that this should help us in terms of be able to leverage the company better going forward.
So what is our current capital ratio? Tier 1?
So, on a balance sheet size of about 4,600 crores, we have an equity of 2,700. And also the risk weightage for affordable housing loans of less than 30 lakhs is very, very less. So it is quite. So if you really look at the capital adequacy that way, it will be over 70-75%.
Okay, so we
this won't be a constraint for us. We are well capitalized in order to take care of growth in the near term.
Correct. So just trying to understand that only, that we would not be then kind of looking to raise further capital at least for the next 3 years or so.
No comments. We are well capitalized to be able to take care of the growth, projected growth in the near term. Yes.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is from the line of Miti Gupta from IIFL. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk about the 4% of insurance top-up cases in the HFC book, how much is contributing in the incremental disbursement?
We didn't get your question right.
So when we are saying that the total insurance loans contributes to 4% of the total AUM, how much does it contribute in the disbursement section?
It will be almost about 4.5%. This is the insurance premium paid for the Credit Shield insurance.
Yeah.
And it is actually based on at the time of disbursements, you take the Credit Shield insurance one time for the tenure of the loan. So in case of small business loans, it will be around 3.5%. In case of home loans, it will be slightly higher than that. That the weighted average what has been given is 4% is the Credit Shield insurance premium, based on the disbursements. That's about it.
In the overall disbursement?
What is that?
Sorry?
Are we doing any top-up loans? Are we giving any top-up loans currently to the customers?
Yes.
Top-up.
Generally, we give top-up loans for our existing customers whose repayment is very good and after a particular period. Okay, so their repayment has to be really good, not with us, plus also with the other financiers to be eligible for the top-up. And as we explained before in the previous question, our top-up on the total AUM is close to about 4%.
And how much it would be in the disbursement?
It will range about 4 to 4.5%. That's it.
4 to 4.5%. And the next question is on the productivity level. So you said that your typical branch breaks even in 5 to 6 months. What is the productivity for a salesperson in the expansion location or in the multiplication?
This particular individual-wise sales productivity I am not having now. I can share with you later on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is from the line of Arjun Bagga from Nirmal Bang. Please go ahead.
Sir, thanks a lot for taking my question again. So this question is a little related to the industry more. So, sir, what is like the risk in the self-construction segment? Like everyone seems to think that it is safe and like the collateral is the land, the LTV ratio is good. But where is it that lenders generally go wrong when underwriting a self-constructed house?
Self-construction basically means you have to deal with all the retail customers. The three main thing is, of course, the underwriting, the credit underwriting. Second thing is the valuation of the property. Our valuation is done by internal valuers. We don't have any external valuers, and they are trained in the company for a long time. Third thing is the legal papers. We should have the real capacity to find out whether they are the real owner of the particular piece of land where they are constructing. These are the three constraints. And these are the three constraints and the risk in funding the customer. Of course, the main important thing is that reach of the branches, the trust, the brand commands in the market, how customer is referring the other customer and how he comes to us, and what kind of feet on street you have and the productivity. So all these contributes. You need to have that much branches, that much sales staff, and that much productivity trained staff to do this self-construction model. It is not like a builder model where you can go to a single place or take 20 or 30 flats on a single place with a single legal and a single technical. Each is an individual property, so it involves a lot of field work and lot of field staff, training the staff, retaining them, keeping the attrition at the minimum, and motivating them. All this helps us. All these are the factors which helps us to do more in the self-construction model. But the market is really big in this particular segment.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As there are no further questions, I would now like to hand the conference over to their closing comments.
Thank you all for attending the call. I hope we have answered most of your questions and queries. If you still have further queries, you can reach us to us our IR agency concept. We would be happy to address them all. And just to summarize, we will continue to, as a company, will continue to focus on serving the low and middle income segment of the population, largely self-employed and largely living in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, and are confident of building productivity, efficient-oriented organization to have efficiency in every aspect, which will help us to deliver value to all stakeholders. Thank you, Bilal, and thank you, Gaurav, for organizing the conference call. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you all for being a part of this conference call. If you need any further information or clarification, please email on gaurav.g@conceptpr.com. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes your conference for today. Thank you for using Chorus Call conferencing service. You may now disconnect your lines. Thank you and have a pleasant day.